One of the bigger tasks of crypto community has been how do we solve scalability? How do we solve scalability of our infrastructure so we can have finally real applications that can roll and scale to like millions of people. Up until now in like 2021 we had only like Ethereum that was like slow and expensive, and that's why NFTs like hit the ceiling so hard and couldn't perform, and probably that's the reason why they're still underperforming this cycle, because only now we're starting to have infrastructure that is ready for consumers. And that was one of the goals. How do we create an infrastructure that is ready for the real applications? What does it mean, real application? That means that there's a lot of users, a lot of transactions. How do we make it affordable?
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have the pleasure to interview Alex and Jana. Alex is the founder of Rarible, and Jana is the head of strategy at the foundation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Ivan.
And can we start with, sorry to interrupt Alex, but can we start with quick intros, and we can start with you, Alex?
Right. Alex here. I don't know, there's multiple versions of how I can introduce myself. I play with that sometimes. I have always been in crypto. Started in 2012. Before that, I was like a bright kid in a small town. I grew up in the internet as Mowgli. You know Mowgli, the guy who grew up in jungle. So left their parents and grew up in jungle. I feel like that, but I left my parents virtually and went to the internet. So that's why when I learned about crypto, that crypto is an internet native currency, where the place that I grew up with without the currency, I was like, yeah, it sounds like a life goal to me, right? Let's make this world better. Let's make the internet better. And since then, been always doing crypto projects, products, startups, yes, and that escalated towards right now when we have Rarible.
And what about you, Jana?
Cool. So my path to crypto has not been through the inner workings of the web. It was more through the brand side of things. So by previous profession, I'm a brand marketer, and I was always working in the creative field. So I had my run around the block in creative advertising, before that publishing and editorial. So, I was always leaning towards working with creators, and that's kind of like what attracted me to make the leap from Web 2 to Web 3 as well, was the NFT market and working with the creator community to, unblock some new opportunities for making sustainable living.
And I feel like you guys have a challenging task, because you're the blockchain for NFTs, and NFTs have been underperforming this cycle. So could you tell me a bit more about the inception, and why did you decide to build the blockchain for NFTs, but also what do you think is the reason that NFTs are down now? I guess NFTs is like profile pictures, but there are multiple cases for it, and we'll go into it.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't just have a blockchain for NFTs, right? Like the Rari ecosystem is bigger than that. So Rari Chain is one part of it. The Rarible protocol is another part of it, right? And Rarible, the marketplace, runs on the Rarible protocol. And Rarible protocol is integrated with the Rari Chain, but it's also integrated with probably 20 plus, different other chains. So it's a truly multi-chain product. A lot of these chains then are represented on Rarible.com, the marketplace, and some of them are just like a backend, essentially integrations, right? The story for inception of the Rari chain is because, so the decentralized part, this protocol, is governed by a DAO. I work at the foundation. We work on behalf of the DAO. So we represent their interests. They give us mandate of what to be working on. And early in the days, we had a series of strategic workshops with the delegates and with the wider community to talk about what is it that we want to be cultivating in terms of an ecosystem, right? And it really boiled down to decentralized NFT infrastructure. So when we have creators in mind, right, and creators is key audience that Rarible has always been working with, right? And when you go to the early days of Rarible, how they were essentially like an uncensored platform, right? And really like free access, and they always stood by the creators by, enforcing royalties. It really made sense for us, this is like over a year ago, to start discussing, why don't we launch our own blockchain that is governed by the DAO, right? That is part of that decentralized NFT infrastructure, so that creators have more options where to house their NFTs, right? And the unique element for the blockchain when you compare it to other pieces of infrastructure out there and ecosystems is that it has royalties embedded on a node level. So it's essentially this value aligned place for creators to be coming and dropping their art. Right now, it's also going to be a home to the Rari DAO and its governance. Right, there's that there are different ways to make that piece of tech work for your community. Right, besides just the NFT aspect. But it is really interesting because then you have a tech stack, right, that you can essentially offer to projects. If they want to be building with the Rarible protocol, they can also be building on Rari Chain.
And when it comes to the chain, Alex, could you just explain the thought process of having an L3 on Arbitrum? So why did you decide to build that extension, and what are the benefits to it?
Right. So, doubling down on what Jana said, I have a feeling that crypto community, up to pretty much today, but still right now as well, one of the bigger tasks of crypto community has been how do we solve scalability? How do we solve scalability of our infrastructure so we can have finally real applications that can roll and scale to like millions of people. And up until now, in like 2021, we had only like Ethereum that was like slow and expensive, and that's why NFTs like hit the ceiling so hard and couldn't perform. And probably that's the reason why they're still underperforming this cycle, because only now we're starting to have some infrastructure that is ready for consumers. And that was one of the goals. How do we create an infrastructure that is ready for the real applications? What does it mean, real application? That means that there's a lot of users, a lot of transactions. How do we make it affordable? When Rari Foundation decided to launch a Rari Chain, I think the state of the market was that layer 2s are great, but they're still only like 10 times cheaper than L1. And it's still not the scale that allows you to create like a Facebook, for example, or like Instagram, like an application with millions of users. It's still not the case. Like Ethereum transaction is like $5. Okay, layer 2 transaction is like $0.50. $0.50 is still too much. You want an on-chain system where you can click buttons and it would just work. Since then, we had like a dank sharding, proto-dank sharding upgrade that made it like 100 times cheaper than layer 1. So it is now like 4-cent transaction. 4 cent is kind of closer to where we want to be, but it's still a bit more. Like on layer 3, you can actually make like limitless transactions, and it works as expected. You just click a button and your transaction is green, and it's like virtually zero. And you can scale way more with layer 3 than with layer 2. So that's I think the main reasoning behind that.
And just to push back on it, now with like blob space and further integration and updates from the foundation, they're hoping to reduce the transaction costs to extremely low, and to have like Ethereum as a DA layer, so everything else execution essentially will be on L2s. So obviously there are some decisions that developers have to make of why should I be on on the L2 or L3. So could you just run me through that process of like, let's say I'm a developer, why should I decide to build on Web3 on a layer 3 instead of a layer 2?
Right. Well, you can select obviously where you want to deploy and your gas prices. It's complicated, right? In a sense, real answer for the developer is always a relationship. When you're selecting a chain, you're selecting a network of partners that you're gonna be with. So if your thesis initially worked for some of the partners and they say, oh, okay, we wanted to build on layer 3 because of the fast settlement, because of the low transaction cost, and then the new developer they're pretty much joining the Rarible ecosystem. That would be as simple as that. You want to build on a chain where like Rarible exists and can support and help and bring you users and visibility. That, like, if we try to go to the bottom of it, that would be the answer. And then, like, why Rarible exists, because like we've decided to build this on layer 3 that is like fast and cheap and so on.
Yeah, and also just like building on that, right? Like imagine, you know, applications where essentially the consumer doesn't even know that they are powered by Web3, right? So in that instance, it becomes for the builder irrelevant whether that chain actually is something that a user has added in their wallet, if they have funds on it, and so on, right? So it becomes more of a choice of what makes the most sense for my project to be performing, right, at a technical standard, right, that I wish for, and that also performs to the lowest cost possible, right, because I'm the one sponsoring the gas fees. Right. So I think that's also like another use case that, this partnership is solving for.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. And just to take a step back and talk about NFTs, a lot of people are willing to argue that NFTs are dead, and especially if you look at crypto Twitter, everyone is like quite negative about it. But I don't fully agree with it because digital art is only one of the use cases when it comes to NFTs, but you can use them as everything. So you can encode everything in a smart contract, have it on an NFT. It can be your plane ticket, it could be a ticket for a concert, it could be even like a membership for something. So, could you tell me a bit more about the trends that you guys are currently seeing within like the NFT ecosystem, and what do you think will be the prevailing narrative? I don't think the NFTs will gain as much popularity during the next bull run, if we want to define it as a bull run. I dislike using that phrase, but I keep keep using it because it's very convenient. But yeah, I don't think that they will gain as much popularity as in 2021. But yeah, just to bring you back to the narratives, what do you think will be the main narratives and the main trends that we'll see within that ecosystem?
Right, it's a great question. So I actually agree with you. I agree with you that NFTs are underperforming this cycle, and there is a good likelihood that is going to be continued this way, and that we're going to see activity on the NFT side only next cycle. Although we're seeing some early signals of that, why that might not be true. Let me dive into that deeper. So why people on crypto Twitter are like, okay, NFTs are underperforming. There is not many use cases. What we're seeing is really that the art and PFP use case, they found their size of the market, which is like an actual size. We've been in a bubble, then it burst. Now it's where it should be, pretty much. Communities are still there. All these crypto people on Twitter are using PFPs on their avatars. Maybe a couple of them removed, but it's still there. The thing is that it doesn't make sense to buy into community for $400,000 like I was in a peak of bull run, but it makes sense to buy into community for like $2,000 or like $10,000. So that's an actual market for this use case. Art as well, right? We're having the overall art market in the world is very small, $60 billion, the whole art market in the world. In the peak of the bull run for NFTs, we had NFTs, I think, generated $25 billion volume. So that was like half of the overall art market. It's too much, right? It should be smaller. It should be around like several billion at the current form of the development of the digital art. So we're seeing these two use cases that have an actual market size. Now, the new use cases, we need new use cases for this to grow. And I can argue that every consumer app that we're now seeing in crypto has NFTs in some form of it. We're seeing an improvement in social, right? We're seeing social apps for Castor, Lens, Rodeo, Zora, right? I would also count all of them as social. They all have NFTs ingrained into them. We're seeing games, all the consumer games using NFTs. We're seeing identity protocols using NFTs. So we're seeing all of these developments of really all crypto outside just money. There is just money in the crypto, and then there is everything else, which I believe is like way bigger than this. It's a foundational, like Web 2 is built on the notion that your email is the foundation of your identity. Web 3 is built on the notion that your wallet is the foundation of your identity, and then all the same like myriad of apps, socials, messengers, music, all of that will be created on the new foundation of your wallet as a foundation of your digital identity. And all of these apps would have NFTs. Now, when does that happen? How much time do we need? Social is a bit early, gaming is a bit early, right? We just finalized the infrastructure cycle with just having fast chains, and like we still need to solve L2 interoperability and chain abstraction to make it even better. We need to solve that, and then we're gonna see a crazy cycle of crypto apps, consumer apps. That's when we're gonna see the true power of NFTs, right? On this cycle, we might still see good action on PFPs. We're seeing that they hit the rock bottom. People start to buy CryptoPunks. CryptoPunk at 10, 20 ETH, Bored Ape at 10, Project Penguin at 10. That's like pretty inexpensive enough to start bidding on that, and we're seeing people bidding on that, and that might give us the catalyst even this cycle, but that would happen inside the existing use cases, right? We will probably not see a new big use case, although I would be hopeful, right? That would be great if we do, but probably not. The current use cases might grow, and new use cases we're gonna see in a couple years. That's like kind of my thesis on what's going on in the NFT space right now.
Yeah, totally, right? And like when you think about the NFTs that kind of like intrinsically hold some value, right? That's kind of like what we see performs still, and those that are mainly for trading are maybe the ones that are lagging behind. I think like one thing, and it's not super scalable, right? But like these commemorative NFTs is something that we see across the board, right? But that's not necessarily like a new use case, right? That's just a little bit of a token of appreciation, but it kind of builds into the idea of that digital identity, right? That you are building through your wallet and through your participation in the ecosystem. So kind of like, keep in the memory of that. I think, like that's a really like interesting way that those NFTs like will actually like shape, how we show up in Web3. And then there's also like a ton of use cases that will just not make the cut to headlines, or they're not gonna be sexy because they will not have really meaning in culture, right? But like, I really want my vaccine records to just be NFTs that I'm holding in my wallet, right? There's like a lot of applications of the technology that will just not be sexy, but it will be very useful.
Yeah, and I guess you outlined some of the use cases. So could you double down on the use cases that are built on top of your blockchain, and how exactly you're enabling? I know that you're mainly positioned as this blockchain for creators. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but could you elaborate on the point of like how do you enable them? And the more important question is like, why should they build on your blockchain than any other blockchain? Because that's the question that any artist or developer would ask themselves.
Yep. Yeah, so you're right. Like it is a blockchain for creators, right? But when you think about creators, we think about them creating their digital art. So we have tools to mint, we have tools to make your drops, we have tools for people to transact, purchase, sell, right? But we also think about you as somebody who's doing this for money, right? It's like a lot of the times the creators are propelled to be doing their creation, not necessarily just because they want to keep a trail and public ownership, but also because they want to generate some sort of income, right? And that kind of like boils down to like sustainable creator economy, right? And that's why we wanted to enforce the royalties on the node level. So if we think about that, then we think about like, what do the creators also do besides just selling through primary sale or getting royalties through secondary sale on their NFTs, and how else can we help these creators understand what their revenue making opportunities are in Web3, right? Because a lot of the times the creator audience is maybe not necessarily as deep, right, to all the different ways of making money in Web3. So we have like what we call essentially like an MVP of a DeFi ecosystem, right? I wouldn't call our chain to be like very like deep in DeFi, but we have like a solid, you know, coverage of the main DeFi use cases, and we're onboarding creators onto, you know, the DeFi opportunities that they have through the projects in our ecosystem. So that's essentially like, you know, something that we're going to be hosting a series workshops on in just a few weeks. So depending on when this podcast goes live, you know, they might have already happened. But essentially just, you know, reaching out to the wider creator community and bringing them into the wider opportunities of Web3, right? And why would they stick? Which was another question. I think it's important to look beyond like just transactional interactions, and a lot of, you know, what we see in Web3 when it comes to like community appeal appears to be quite transactional, right? So really like showing up for the community there and like cultivating it, I think is vital, right? And having a sense of belonging essentially, right? There's a reason why like Taylor Swift has like a really cult following, right? Like I'm not saying that that's necessarily like, you know, the level of, you know, cult that we want to generate, but essentially like, you know, having a sense of like, it's not just like a piece of tech, it's not just a piece of infra that you're choosing, but you're also choosing to join on a certain culture and in a certain community.
And you touched upon something that permeates throughout your website. There's like royalties on the node level, and I really like that concept. So could you just double down on it and explain it a bit further and why that's unique to your blockchain?
Well, we're just the ones who thought of it. It's like anybody could have actually built it in their blockchain if they wanted to take such a stance on royalties, right? It will be probably limiting to some of the projects to be building on your blockchain. We know that there are some marketplaces that don't necessarily enforce royalties. So we just wanted to double down on like actually having the creators back. And on a technical level, how it works is that, you know, the sequencer that essentially validates transactions can recognize that this is a transaction between an ERC20 and let's say ERC721 token. And it's able to recognize whether royalties are part of this transaction or not. And if they're not, then it will simply not process that transaction. So it's the sequencer that is enforcing the royalties to be paid.
Okay, and do you enable artists or creators to adjust and add the percentage of royalty? Do you give them like all the freedom, or is it encoded by you by default?
So that's on the app level, and Alex can speak to how it works on Rarible.
Right. So it works the way that the creator, it's not really a creator, it's anyone on that chain who deploys the smart contract. When they deploy the smart contract, they're specifying the royalty inside the smart contract. There is a standard ERC 2892 or something like that. I don't really remember the numbers. So you can specify that your smart contract will answer what is an actual royalty for this item. So the deployer of the smart contract is determining that. Artist can be that can be an artist, that can be an app, that can be anyone, right? On Rarible, when we deploy smart contract, we allow you to specify it's on the front end. So artists can select how much royalties they want to receive for their item, and that's going to be deployed. Smart contract will answer that, and the node will listen to that information, and when the transaction happens, it will understand whether that particular number is paid in royalties or not. If not, then transaction doesn't go through.
And could you also tell me about the other ways that you empower creators at Rarible? Because I'm sure that it's not just the royalty on nodes.
Right. Well, it's always about distribution, right? What do the creator to care about is like whether I'm selling or not. So it's all about the distribution, it's all about the users, it's all about the community. We have a product, right? The product allows you to create NFTs, the product allows you to drop NFTs, the product is nice, it's sleek, it's beautiful. The positioning on the market is like there's like 1 million people coming to Rarible every month to look at what's going on, and there is your top drops happening right now on the main page. We put there, we curate an important drops with the community, who should we drop with. We're going to evolve and make it even like more more advanced, in the sense like right now you're seeing only one section of like all the drops happening. You would be able to see like categories, you would be able to see drops happening by chains, so individual communities. It's all about having the place where you can highlight yourself and have a certain exposure to the buyers. It's all about maintaining the balance between buyers and sellers, and that's the hardest part of building a marketplace, really.
And you're essentially, as you said, building the marketplace. And I was just wondering, where do you see the most adoption of NFTs? Is it through like musicians or people that just create this digital art in some form, or like what's the category there?
It's the intersection between culture, narratives, so it's what's going on right now on the market, and the community that these artists have been able to build. One of the most successful drops recently, I would make an example, would be like Eclipse drop. There is a new blockchain launching on Rarible, and they have a certain community, and on the day of the solar eclipse we're making a drop with the artist that made the picture of an eclipse on the day of eclipse with Eclipse blockchain, and it's minting over like 600,000 pieces. So what does it have? It has a combination of something actual happening in the space, some narrative, something's going on right now. There is a piece of art there. There is a thought leadership. You created something, and then there is a community. There is an actual community that cares about it.
And could you also tell me a bit more about this idea of like artists coming to the Web3 space, and we've seen some negative press simply because of celebrity meme coins and celebrity coins. So they're trying to capitalize on this emerging technology, and unfortunately some of them are doing it mainly for financial reasons, but I'm sure that a big chunk of these artists are more than happy to build and more than happy to create actual communities. So there are actually two questions there. One of them is, what do you think is the role of musicians and artists in general, like creatives? But also, do you think that they're bringing this like just negative connotations with the idea of blockchain? Because I mean, we already have like a lot of people that are associated like or perceived as scammers because they use blockchain. So now we also have artists that would just drop some random meme coins and scam people.
But I think that's exactly the point, right? Like, how do you show up, and like, what is it that you bring to the Web3 community, right? It's a big difference if you actually are an artist and you like go through the effort of coding a generative piece of art, and you're like selling that, and it's a very different reality if you are just essentially capitalizing on your audience that might not even be fluent in Web3, right? And you're essentially just, finding a different way how to monetize your following. I think like these are like very different ways of showing up in Web3 as a creator, as an artist. And I think it's just like the reality of, people. You're going to have people on across the entire spectrum, right? So not everybody will be showing up as, and adding value, right, through their creations in Web3. That said, that's essentially like, where you will see the longevity though, right? So like the meme coin will spike, right? There definitely is, some sort of underlying value that will prevail as well, but it's not necessarily, something that is balanced, right? Or it's more of in the degen type of things, right? It's less of, this is art. It's more of like, where is my opportunity, right? To be coming in and out. And it's also a little bit of a game, to be honest, right? Like, not all these meme coins are actually like traded for real, earning or real revenue, right? From the people who trade with them. A lot of it is just like adrenaline and dopamine. Right? And it's just like a different type of game than, the first example of the generative artist who puts in like, days of work, right, to code something, and then, that piece actually like is a collector piece. Like a lot of these NFTs you will see actually don't have a big secondary volume, because they actually are pieces that people hold. So it reflects a little bit more on the traditional art market.
Nice. And Alex, do you have a take on it? I saw you smiling there while Jana was talking about it.
No, nothing to add really. It's all about how you enter the space, right? I fully agree with this. You either do value add or value extract, and value adding is by helping to be a voice of the values that the space has. That's why like artists, when they create art, they embroider like values of decentralization, openness, and blah blah blah. So like if you don't do that, you're not contributing and you're extracting, and it actually doesn't work. I mean, what's the market cap of the biggest meme coin in that is native to the space? It's like billions, right? What WIF is probably the biggest. What's the market cap of these influencer coins? Like tens of millions tops. I think maybe a couple of million right now. So people are not stupid. So value extracting doesn't work long term. It's like it's short term you can do something, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with it. And just to bring you back on the idea of like brands as well, how do you think the brands will engage with their customers and solidify this existing relationships through NFTs? Because that's something that we've seen, especially with games that are prominent among the Gen Z, and they call them metaverse games, but I think they're far away from that term. But the younger generations are really interested in them, and brands are trying to capitalize and trying to have ads within these games to ensure that they attract their attention. So, do you think that we'll see the same emergence of brands coming into the like NFT space and trying to use, because I know that some of the biggest brands out there like Louis Vuitton and Gucci are either working or considering the use cases of NFTs, because they're like probably a very good way to verify the authenticity of an item, and for their audiences it's very important. So do you guys enable brands to do that, and like how do you enable them? Why should they build on your blockchain than any other blockchain?
Of course. Let me try to unpack that. There's multiple questions there. Brands are coming to the space for sure. Brands want to have a better relationship with their audience. They already have relationship with their audience, and they are like understanding that the young audience likes to own things online, and it all comes down to like what is your audience, what is your person actually, who is your user actually. Is that the person who is sitting in a basement somewhere in a physical city, or this is somebody who is really active on your Discord, really active on your Twitter, really active in the digital space and has an avatar, right? So that's a person who's your customer, right? And you want to build a connection with like a digital identities of the people, and people like to have digital identities, extensive digital identities. Now it's an uphill battle in the sense that crypto people, they like been red pilled in that sense. They already learned what does it mean to have digital identity, to have like storage of your like 12 words and so on. For brands it's harder. The brands want to have email and password logins as the foundation of digital identity, but then it doesn't allow you to connect to the other apps with the same email and password, so it's harder. And I'm like super grateful that brands are doing the experiments. At some point when we have even better infrastructure, it's gonna solve a lot of issues for brands, and we're gonna have a floodgate of brands onboarding. And getting back to your question, like how are we helping? Basically, by providing this suite of tools. There is a chain that is like virtually has zero cost for the transaction, that can allow people to onboard millions of their fans without explaining to them what does it mean to have a gas price. You can build with like a gasless transactions, and brand can sponsor all the transactions, which is not really possible even on L2. If you try to sponsor transactions for the million users on L2, that's a huge cost for you, right? And then we're bringing a Rarible X product, which is a marketplace as a service if brands want to do the drops or something else for their community in a brand safe environment. And we're bringing partners that are solving the credit card on ramp. We're bringing the partners that are solving email and password wallets. So basically brand can come to like us collectively and have the whole suite of the infrastructure needed for their strategy, Web3 strategy.
And John, on your side, could you tell me what are you guys planning to do, and what are the main updates that you're planning to implement by the end of this year at the foundation?
Yeah, so we're working on two key initiatives. One I already anticipated briefly. So we're essentially running a series of workshops to onboard creators onto DeFi, and with that we will be running a contest as well for exhibiting your art at a cool event. I can't spoil that much more until we actually like announce the contest. But yeah, essentially like a community way of coming together and celebrating creators in the space. And then the other big piece for us is because we are working on behalf of the DAO, and the DAO runs through like a decentralized governance process. We're working on a big upgrade. So we're like somewhere in the first third of that process, but essentially relaunching our token to have a new architecture that enable us to move our governance to a multi-chain world. So usually governance happens on one blockchain, and there are a few DAOs that have multi-chain governance, but in the sense of passing the decisions of the vote that happens on one chain with tokens on one chain to multiple ecosystems that they govern. But the upgrade that we want to embark on is taking it just like one notch higher, and it would actually take the tokens from all the ecosystem into the voting power. So in that way, the governance will truly be multi-chain, because you can take the Rari, which is our governance token ownership on mainnet, Arbitrum One, Polygon, Rari Chain, wherever it will live. And you can use that to vote on a decision that then can be bridged to any of these chains as well. So that's a big project that we've been tackling, and it's really just to position the DAO in a place that they can govern the full multi-chain nature of the Rarible protocol.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. And Alex mentioned chain abstraction and interoperability earlier on, and it sounds like you guys are aiming to achieve that. And are you planning to do it within all the EVM compatible chains, or are you also planning to at some point extend that reach to other blockchains as well? What's on the roadmap there? It doesn't need to be within this year, but I would love to understand what's the ultimate objective there.
Right, so there is a couple of pieces going on. I think the chain abstraction piece would mostly happen on the application layer, right? So we have an application layer, and on the application layer we can integrate all sorts of bridges that exist, and all sorts of bridges that allow us to buy an item from another chain using money from a chain that I have money on. In the context of like Rari Chain, I think what's important is to have this infrastructure for bridges, to have bridges adopting Rari Chain, to have partnerships with. There's a lot of work on the infrastructure side now, as I'm saying, to have a partnership with people like Espressa that are building shared sequencers that are making it all better and better. Did you announce that? Is that public yet? I'm not sure. It's gonna be teaser.
No, the Rari Chain definitely did announce the news that we're partnered with Espresso.
Okay. All
That's
right.
good.
So I'm not leaking anything. So yeah, that's like two sides. Rari Chain is building infrastructure, Rarible as a marketplace integrating bridges, and of course you can integrate bridges that are like sitting outside EVM as well. And there is one key missing piece on that end is when I'm connecting your wallet to the dApp today, I can connect one chain or I can connect all EVM chains, but I cannot connect my wallet in the same time with Bitcoin and Solana addresses. For example, just the API of the wallets doesn't support this. I know Coinbase wallet was working on that. I know dynamic wallet providers advocating wallets. So if there's any wallets that are listening to this right now, that is something needed in the space. So for example, for us as a Rarible, if we can connect to OKX wallet or Coinbase wallet, and we can receive all the addresses from multiple chains in the wallet API, and then we can receive signatures from all these addresses, because when you connect the wallet, you also need to make a signature. You need to sign. So the wallet needs to sign with all these different wallets and give us the signatures, and then we can understand, okay, these are all the wallets of this user. And then that would allow us to easily integrate bridge. So I want to buy Solana item, I can spend money on Bitcoin. Otherwise you would have to reconnect, disconnect wallet and connect again. So the space needs to do something, some more things yet to achieve this, but it's possible.
And are you guys working on it? Is that what you are essentially implying there?
Right, I mean, at least we're thinking about it, right? It's not possible yet. We're working on EVM, chain abstraction, and non-EVM is a bit out there.
Yeah, thank you. And Jana, you mentioned the token earlier on. So could you just tell me a bit more about it? And as you mentioned, you're building a new, there's a new proposal proposed to the DAO, and the current token is mainly a governance token, but please correct me if I'm wrong. What other utility are you planning to implement and introduce to the token? And I know that normally whenever the community is building a proposal, there is normally a lot of discussions among the active members of the community. So could you just tell me a bit more about it and because even though it's early stage, my understanding is that normally there is two camps forming, or there's consensus forming from a very early stage. So could you just run me through that entire process?
Yeah, so the governance token is called Rari, and in its current design, you need to lock it, and by locking, it turns into VRari, which then can be used for governance, and our governance is on mainnet. So that's essentially the current design. What the upgrade means is that our governance will be moving to Rari Chain, and with that, the token has been upgraded, and it no longer will need to be locked to the VRari model. It can be used for governance in its liquid form. So that will essentially not make you, it will essentially alleviate the need to lock it for certain periods of time, right? Now, then the proposal you might be alluding to is a proposal by one of the service providers to the DAO that run the on-chain platform on which the governance is happening, right? So they give a really nice UI and really reduce the complexity of what being participant in on-chain governance means. And their proposal is to build a staking layer for the governance token, right? And with that, you will stake your governance token, receive the staked version back, and you will be able to continue participating in governance. And now you can also be using your token for DeFi. So it will essentially eliminate the need to choose between governance and trading when it comes to the token. So that's really interesting. To your point, I think the consensus in the DAO is still forming and the discussion is still happening. So let's see where that discussion pans out. But it's an interesting proposal, right? Because it would, offer doing something new. We're the second DAO in which this proposal is being discussed. The first DAO was Arbitrum DAO that actually did embrace this path forward. So I'm really curious to see what happens in our DAO.
And is there any utility to the token? So let's say I'm an artist and I want to use the blockchain for my NFTs. Would I need the token at any point to generate NFTs, or is it all covered by the blockchain?
So the native currency of Rari Chain is ETH. We didn't want to add complexity by, asking you to actually come to the chain with Rari token. So we kept it to ETH. So all you need to do is you need to bridge some ETH and then you're going to be able to perform transactions and pay for your gas.
Yeah, that's my bad. I actually wasn't aware of it.
Most people assume that it's going to be the custom token because that's what most blockchains do. Right? That's the utility that you're talking about. But I think we just wanted to reduce the complexity for users and really do it for the user and less for, the token.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I assumed. And there's another topic that I want to talk to you about, and it's the physical to digital. And a lot of people are talking about it, how they want to integrate this physical QR codes to an actual art piece of art, and once you scan it, there will be a digital version of it that's verifying the original copy, because that will essentially eliminate counterfeiting. What's your take on it, and is that something that you're thinking about, and do you think they could be a potential use case?
I thought about it a lot. There is interesting use cases. There is not much success yet because the issue is of how would actually protect from counterfeiting, right? So imagine you've copied a piece and you put a QR code on it. All right, it would show you an NFT. So then in order to protect the piece, you need to do what? When the sale is happening, you need to transfer the NFT as well, so that the new user has an NFT like a certificate. Okay, that would help. That would help. There is a risk though that at some point they would start living different lives, right? If somebody didn't transfer it, does it mean that I'm no longer had the authentic item or what? So I think some luxury goods try to do the non-blockchain version of that. What they mostly do is that you can scan the QR code and they show you the history of this item. They show you where it was created, when it was first sold, when it was second sold in the store, so you can have a guess whether something happened or not. I think interesting things are happening is tokenization, in the sense that if you put an item, a physical item, in a custodian specific team that would have the custody of this item, and they would only give this item to the person who has the NFT, that is kind of working tie. So you can have a custodian, and in order to get an item, you are buying an NFT. So the NFT is kind of the original in that sense, and the physical item is only given to the one who has it. And it's similar to what's happening in the RWA space, when we have a custodian of a BNY Mellon custodies $1 billion worth of treasuries for MakerDAO, and the MakerDAO is having a DAI, that's old names, right? They renamed recently. They are having dollars that are backed by that, and the dollars are the original. So I think something similar will happen with NFT space when we have like just like this space evolving. We'll have more custodials. My dream is to have NFT mortgages, right, for the homes. That would be nice.
Yeah, and I think the piece about the digital twins, right? It doesn't necessarily need to be just to prevent counterfeiting or prove like the originality of your physical item. It can also be like a value add that the brands can use as a strategy for rewarding their customers, right? So like back to what you were talking about, like with the digital games and the digital ownership being important, especially for like younger audiences, right? I think like, the power lies in, I don't know, Gucci partners with Roblox, right? And now like your Gucci bag that you buy in the real world will have a digital twin that you can flex in whatever metaverse game, right? So I think that then becomes like a more of an added utility to owning the to owning the physical item, right? And then the digital twin kind of like starts having a life on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just go through some predictions and see whether they'll materialize. So we can actually start with the digital twins. How long do you think it will take until they become mainstream? And I know that they're happening now, but I would love to know when everyone will be talking about it, and even my parents or my grandparents or whoever that's not a Web3 native will be using them in some capacity. Who's willing
I
to
have
give
no
it first that?
7 years.
Okay, I was
Okay,
gonna be
that's
more
it.
optimistic. I was gonna be more optimistic. I was like 3 or 4, you know. I always like to sprint to the finish line.
And what about brands using NFTs? And again, I know that they're doing it, but I mean, using it broadly, so everyone now uh, is not only able, but they're also encouraged to open this really easy account. You can do it while you're at the store, and you can easily open an account and you have your NFT there without even knowing that it's an NFT, and you don't need to understand the technology. When do you think that we'll reach that level?
I'll keep the time frame the same because I feel like, they're kind of like a different version of the same question, right? But I do think that like a couple of things need to happen for that future to materialize. And one is like the rep for NFTs and crypto in general, right? I think like there needs to be a bit of a sentiment shift because brands essentially will not embrace technology that they feel like their consumers will feel like, it's not um, like doesn't have their best interest in heart, essentially, right? And so that's one piece, and the other piece is that infra, right? That infra that is being improved, and we're like almost there, but we're not fully there. So we just like need to cross that bridge, and then that future can materialize.
Okay, and my next one is about the PFP mania. Do you think that it will come back at some point, or is it dead for good?
We're seeing it coming back right now. Yeah, I'm thinking of buying more. Thinking of buying CryptoPunk and My Lady, and My Lady gives you access to the meme coin trading chat. So it's like it works.
And okay, so something slightly different will be NFTs used for um, something like your ID or your medical record, something that Jana mentioned earlier on. So, how long do you think it would take until, let's say, government institutions accept that this is the most effective and efficient way to have information about yourself, and you don't need this physical copies to just go wherever. You just need everything to be on one comparatively secure ledger.
It depends what government you're talking about. Some
that's
governments
that's a very that's a
like
very good
doing.
question. I was like talking broadly about it, but let's say
Yeah.
Western governments.
Yeah, so I think like for example, the state of California is like kind of like being the most progressive in the US. right? There is, crypto experimentation happening when it comes to like actual like government using the technology. There are certain states, even in Europe, right, like Estonia, that it really is embracing like the digital world way much more. So like some governments are like kind of like already on the way. I mean, US in general like is just such a big market, and it's like very fragmented because a lot of what we're talking about here actually is in the hands of like private companies, and the level of standardization would actually need to be like quite massive. Like if we're talking about interoperability between our L2s and L3s and alt chains, I think the state of like United States like medical providers is probably even like wilder than that, right? So I think like that is probably like a much longer path, right? But like some smaller or more like contained um, entities, I think you are able to probably like get there sooner than later.
Okay, so how long, just to paraphrase that, will be for mass adoption?
I think there will be just women who will just never do it. I think this is the one where you're just gonna see like two different two different realities.
Nice. Thank you
I mean,
guys. Thank
there's a reason US still asks you to mail a check somewhere. I think that's like certain things will just prevail for a very long time.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's gonna take like 20 years. I think the government is the slowest moving out of all that. We'll have an internet and the blockchain to form a new government before that happens. I think.
Okay, final question for you is favorite NFT collection.
My lady.
Nice.
Well, I have rainbow punks just because
Okay.
it's a collection that my husband coded a long time ago, so I gotta keep it home.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much for joining me today, guys. Such a pleasure talking to you.
Pleasure likewise. Thank you.
Thanks so
Nice.
much.
Thank you.